Welcome to another episode of our video series of the mechanics of human cognition.
It's great to be back. How has your week been?
I'm doing well, thank you. Just trying to keep my head above water with the constant stream of information.
Yes. It's overwhelming.
It really is. It makes you think about how our ancient brains are trying to cope with all this modern complexity.
That struggle is actually a perfect entry point for what we're discussing today. We're going to explore probably the oldest and most powerful mechanism of social control there is, the collective urge to shame and punish.
Right. So we're going to trace this line from, primal group enforcement all the way to modern digital mobs, the whole cancel culture phenomenon.
Exactly. Our mission really is to analyze the neurological and social wiring behind this behavior. We need to understand this powerful ancient instinct that allows a group's desire for justice or, for violence to completely overguide an individual's own conscience.
So this is us, as experts in social cognition, really breaking down why the mob acts the way it does.
Precisely. Whether they're carrying torches or just angry tweets.
Okay, so if we're going to understand the digital mob, we have to start at the very beginning. And what's so fascinating is how far back this blueprint for collective punishment really goes.
It's a profound thought, isn't it? This urge is not uniquely human. At its core, it's a pro-social behavior.
Pro-social, meaning it's actually good for the group.
In an evolutionary sense, yes. It's an adaptive behavior that evolution selected to enforce rules that are necessary for survival. It's a kind of social insurance policy you see in many highly social species.
And the research gives us such a clear, almost brutal example with chimpanzees.
Yes, the chimpanzee example is perfect. Think about their economy, so to speak. They hunt, but meat is incredibly valuable and very scarce.
And there's a rule.
An absolute rule. For the survival of the clan, meat must be shared. It's a social contract you just don't break.
And if someone does break it, if they're caught, sneaking off to eat alone.
The consequences are, well, they're horrifying. We're talking about a collective execution. The group will literally tear off the individual's limbs or tail right there in front of everyone else.
Wow. But why so extreme? I mean, for one piece of meat.
And that's the key. The harshness of the penalty is because the threat of the group dissolving is far, far greater than the life of one selfish individual.
So it's a message.
It's what we call costly signaling. It's evolution's way of reinforcing sharing. If selfish behavior gets a pass, the group collapses. So evolution selected for a mechanism that punishes the selfish actor so severely that it guarantees everyone else falls in line.
So the more complex the social system, the more severe the punishment needs to be to hold it all together. And you need a bigger, more sophisticated brain to even manage that.
You've hit the nail on the head. This kind of complex punishment is complex behavior. We expect to see it in primates and upper group mammals because they have the cognitive horsepower to track all these rules and alliances.
So when we look at witch hunts or organized violence in human history, we're really just seeing a scaled-up version of that same primal reflex.
An amplified, industrialized version of it, yes.
Which brings us to the problem of scale. We went from a clan of 50 chimpanzees to a global community. Our brains obviously did not keep up.
And that is the critical point. The human brain has a very real, very hard-coded limitation. We call it Dunbar's number.
Right, that we can only really maintain meaningful relationships with about 150, maybe 200 people.
Roughly, yes. So what do you think happens when your brain, which is designed for a village of 150, suddenly encounters a group of thousands online? Or millions of people in a country?
It can't handle it. It overloads.
It experiences cognitive overload. And it loses the ability to see individuals. Think of it like a computer trying to render a huge video file. To stop from crashing, it just drops the resolution way, way down.
So people stop being individuals and just become blurry pixels.
Exactly. They become grainy, low-res thumbnails in our minds. And when you lose that individual resolution, your brain defaults to generalization. It stops seeing unique people. It just sees categories.
Simplified, usually negative caricatures.
The X-ists, those people from that ideology. And what's fascinating is that creating these categories is actually a way for the brain to avoid the intellectual pain of dealing with complexity.
So it's a cognitive shortcut that allows us to justify atrocity.
A powerful way to put it. Yes. This loss of resolution is what enables us to commit or, just to justify these extreme acts of violence against groups. We see it throughout history, but the source material had that terrifyingly modern example.
You're talking about the anecdote of the young man?
Yes, justifying the murder of women and children because, in his mind, they all support terrorists. He has collapsed them all into one category.
And when he was pushed on it, specifically about the children, he just said they'd grow up to be the enemy anyway.
He was projecting a future category onto a present individual to keep his moral license. It's chilling. The most socially developed mind on the planet, the human mind, is also the only one capable of creating such radical othering.
So our brain can't handle the scale, so it simplifies the targets into non-human boxes, and then that ancient chimp-like punishment reflex gets turned on.
And applied to this huge abstract group. And today, the triggers aren't even about scarce resources like meat anymore. Now it's abstract things.
Morality, honor, political ideas, they trigger the mob even faster.
Okay, let's bring this into the digital world. If sheer scale causes this cognitive failure, the internet seems like the perfect environment to weaponize it.
It is. It's a massive crowded space that also, and this is crucial, bypasses our natural social safety mechanisms.
How so?
Well, there are studies going back 20, 25 years on this. When you meet someone new in person, face to face, your amygdala, your brain's stress and caution center, it lights up.
Right, that's what makes you polite, maybe a little distant, you don't want to cross a line. Exactly. It's essential social friction. But when you first interact with someone online, especially just through text, that amygdala activity is often low or completely absent.
So you're saying we're communicating without our brain's natural alarm system?
We call it amygdalous communication. The emotional caution isn't there. That's why a simple disagreement over text can explode into a vicious fight that would just never happen in person. The safety mechanism is digitally bypassed.
So you have a lack of emotional consequence combined with a scale that guarantees cognitive collapse. It's the perfect storm for a digital mob.
It really is. And yet, even in that environment, the individual conscience is still there somewhere. The sources bring up the concept of IAP.
IAP. You mentioned that before. Can you explain what that is? Is it a cultural thing or is it more universal?
It's a wonderful concept. It's more than just guilt. IAP translates roughly to shame, but it's specifically about social disapproval. It's the stain on your honor when you break a community norm. And even people in these digital mobs, if they reflect on it privately, they know what they're doing is wrong. Their inner IAP detector goes off. But the group psychology and the immediate reward from the platform, it just overrides that feeling.
That reward being the digital catharsis trap.
Yes. The impulsive, emotional part of the brain feels satisfied just by doing something.
Tweeting your outrage, sharing the post.
It gives you an immediate but very cheap sense that you've fulfilled your duty. It's an emotional relief valve. But here's the critical problem. That cheap catharsis, it acts like a narcotic. It anesthetizes the impulse to do something real, something constructive in the real world.
It's like an opioid for outrage. You get the rush, you feel like you've done your part, and your moral obligation feels met. But the actual problem hasn't been touched. Your energy is just spent.
Perfectly put. And this is so well illustrated by that anecdote from the sources about the social system in Brussels.
Right, the daughter locked out of her apartment. Can you walk us through that again?
Of course. So a young woman is locked out. A simple, immediate human problem. She knocks on all her neighbors' doors. She can hear their home.
And nobody helps.
Not a single person opens their door. Not to help, not even to call someone for her. Why? Because in these highly regulated societies, people are trained to avoid unpredictable risk. An unknown person is a liability, a legal complication. It's messy.
They're prioritizing procedure over a person in need.
Exactly. But then the locksmith shows up, and to get in, he has to damage the door frame. A clear, predictable violation of the building code.
And what happens then?
Then the neighbors pour out of their apartments. They're furious, collectively protesting the property damage.
Wow, the contrast is just stunning.
It's profound, isn't it? They'll protest a predictable rule-based violation, which has a low cognitive cost. But they won't help with a messy, unpredictable human problem, because that requires real empathy, which is cognitively expensive.
So we live in societies where we're terrified of spontaneous, real-world help, but perfectly comfortable joining a low-friction, high-intensity digital mob.
And here's the connection. Real action takes serious, sustained energy. Harassing someone online, getting caught up in that digital outrage, it consumes a massive amount of what we call driving energy.
It leaves you with nothing in the tank for actual productive change.
The keyboard warrior is exhausted by their own noise. They've fulfilled their moral quota for the day without achieving a single thing in the real world.
And you're saying the system It likes it this way.
The system loves this behavior. It creates millions of loud, angry, but ultimately paralyzed and ineffective people. Their initiative is drained on noise that, in the end, just reinforces the status quo.
Which takes us to the final and maybe most disturbing point, the ultimate form of lynching, the systemic control.
That control is no longer some future possibility. It's here, it's active, and it's managed by algorithms. They are the new enforcers.
It's not chance that determines what you see online.
Not at all. Algorithms decide what you see, what you hear, what you come to believe. They curate your reality. They decide who gets amplified and who gets, well, canceled. The power struggle today isn't over land anymore. It's over data and the AI that can evaluate it.
The algorithm is the modern-day executioner.
Absolutely. The system is already lynching us. Not because we're bad people, but because we are predictably, reliably human. We are so susceptible to this kind of manipulation through our ancient social wiring.
And this all becomes much more urgent when we think about technology not just being on our desks, but on our bodies or in them.
The transition from wearables to implants, that's the point of no return.
Because you can't just pull the plug.
Once that tech is integrated, the off switch is gone. The moment for reflection disappears. You'll be permanently online, permanently open to manipulation, to algorithmic punishment and reward, waking up online and staying online forever.
So the system wants us loud, predictable, and paralyzed. Our job then is to protect our own energy, to become aware of this.
That is the single most crucial takeaway. You, the listener, have to ask yourself, where does your true power actually lie? Is it in joining that furious but ultimately powerless online crowd?
Or is it in quiet, strategic action that actually confronts the source of a problem?
The wise path is never the loudest one. Wise people understand that shouting in the digital street just burns the fuel you need for the long, hard journey of making real change. They either confront the system at its source, or they start building something new from the ground up.
So if your only goal online is to feel that rush of moral superiority, you're just taking the digital anesthetic. You're helping the system keep you right where you are.
You have to know the difference between feeling strong because you're in an anonymous crowd and building genuine strength through focused, real-world work.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Where are you letting your energy be drained? Can you identify just one piece of the current digital noise, one outrage cycle, one shaming campaign that you can consciously step away from today?
Protect that energy, conserve it, and then apply it to one single, genuine, positive action in your physical reality. Because protecting your own initiative is the only way you can begin to challenge the algorithms that are trying to decide your reality for you.
A vital challenge for all of us. Thank you for this.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.